Karen's scream was drowned beneath the roar of the bulldozer blade smashing through her HOA office wall. Paper fines fluttered like confetti into the lake air, swirling in slow circles before sinking into the water. Her voice cracked as she realized her empire was crumbling, literally collapsing on a foundation she never owned. I stood there, boots planted firm in the soil I owned, watching her precious paper authority turn to dust. You ever see someone realize in real time they've declared war on the wrong man? That moment when sinking a boat in a lake you don't own turns into the biggest mistake of your life? That was her. Because I was the one who owned this lake, and I was done watching her play dictator. The stillness that settled over Briggs' lake was deafening. Not even a ripple disturbed the surface, as if the water itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. That silence? That was peace built on years of quiet strength, of knowing the land and water belonged to me, Mason Briggs, not just a man who owned the land, but the land that owned him. Her screams faded into the background as the wall splintered and the debris rained down. The old office, once a symbol of her control, was shredded apart, its walls, desks, and fake plaques now just fragments in the dirt. The fake authority she'd built crumbled with every brick, and I watched her stand helpless as her carefully crafted house of cards collapsed. And I knew, deep down, this was only the beginning. Because she had declared war on the wrong man. And now she was about to learn what happens when the land fights back. I stayed silent, watching her stumble back, her face twisted with rage and disbelief. The crowd that had gathered, neighbors, onlookers, even a few of her own board members, stood frozen. No one dared step forward. They knew, just like I did, that this wasn't just about a building, a boat, or a piece of land. It was about power, control, and a woman who thought she could rewrite the rules. But rules. I'd written my own. And now, I was about to remind everyone what real authority looked like. The bulldozers didn't stop. They pushed deeper, tearing into the foundation of her office, the concrete cracking like thunder. The building shuddered, then finally gave way, collapsing inward in a cloud of dust. It was a spectacle, destruction born from years of lies, greed, and a hunger for control. Karen's voice rose again, this time more frantic, trying to rally her followers. "Stop, this is illegal." But it was too late. The law was already on my side. I'd called in the sheriff, had everything court-approved, and now I watched as her empire was reduced to rubble. The crowd cheered, some clapping, others just staring, stunned by the power of what they saw. She tried to push past the deputies, her heels clicking furiously on the gravel, but they held her back. Her face twisted in fury, her last desperate attempt to cling to her false throne. But her words fell flat, drowned out by the sound of steel and concrete being torn apart. And then, in that moment, when her world was falling apart, I stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "This land is mine, and I don't just own it, I protect it." Karen's eyes flashed with pure hatred. "You'll regret this," she spat. "This isn't over." I looked her dead in the eye. "No, Karen, it's just beginning." Because sinking my boat was only the first move, now I was making sure she'd never threaten this land or me again. And the moment the last piece of her office hit the ground, I knew I had won. Not just a battle, but the war. The dust settled, and silence stretched like a heavy curtain over Briggs Lake. The wreckage of Karen's office was a heap of broken glass, splintered wood, and shattered lies. I stood there, watching her eyes darting wild with fury and disbelief, unable to believe her empire had just been obliterated. The crowd behind me was quiet, stunned by the destruction, by the raw power of what had just happened. But I knew this wasn't just about the building. It was about who owned the land, the true power that no one could take away. Karen's face twisted in rage. She reached into her purse, pulling out her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed. I didn't flinch. I already knew what was coming. The moment she realized her last hope was slipping away, she'd try to call in her favors, scream for help, or threaten me again. But she was too late. I'd already taken control. The sheriff's deputies moved swiftly, blocking her frantic gestures. One deputy whispered into his radio, eyes sharp. The crowd shifted, uneasy, unsure whether to cheer or fear what was next. Karen's voice, once loud and commanding, was reduced to a trembling whisper, her threats, her accusations all fading into the background. Her last attempt to hold on to her illusion of power had just crumbled beneath the weight of truth and steel. I stepped closer, voice calm but undeniable. This land doesn't belong to her, it's mine, and I won't let anyone take what's rightfully mine again. My words cut through the air like a blade. Her eyes flashed with defiance, but it was hollow, empty. She knew she'd lost. The bulldozers roared again, tearing into what was left of her office, grinding away the lies embedded in its walls. As the final beams buckled and fell, a wave of relief washed over me. Not just relief, vindication. Every lie she told, every scheme she tried to hide was exposed today. People started to murmur. Some clapped, others simply stared at the wreckage. It was over, or so I thought. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her slip past the deputies, her face streaked with dust and fury. She lunged forward, trying to grab the last piece of her shattered empire, screaming, "You'll regret this. You'll pay for this." But her voice was drowned out by the hum of the machinery, the final collapse echoing across the lake. The last of her control was gone, buried beneath the rubble. I turned away, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. This land, this lake, this was mine. No one could take it. Not Karen, not her board, not her lies. And now, I had the proof, the power and the clarity to make sure no one ever tried again, because the land always wins. And today, I had claimed mine. For good. The wreckage of Karen's office smoldered in the rising dust, but I didn't look away. My eyes fixed on her, trembling, defeated, yet still trying to hold on to her false crown. She reached into her purse, again, but this time her hand was trembling so badly she couldn't even pull out her phone. The deputies closed in and her face twisted into a snarl. She spat out one last threat, "You'll regret this," but her voice cracked like fragile glass. I didn't bother answering. I already knew. The battle was over. The land had spoken. The law had spoken. And I had made sure they understood. The bulldozers kept grinding, tearing down what was left of her empire, brick by brick, board by board. The ground beneath my feet felt solid, rooted in truth, in power. That's when I saw her stand on her trembling legs, eyes wild with desperation, and suddenly lunged toward the debris. She clawed at the broken wood, trying to grab a piece of her shattered illusion, her voice shrill with fury. "You can't do this, this isn't over." But her words were swallowed by the roar of machinery and the distant hum of the crowd. I stepped back, watching her flail helplessly, knowing she'd crossed every line, land, law, and dignity. Her last scream echoed across the water, but no one was listening anymore. The whole world had already moved on. And then I saw it, the final twist. As the dust settled, I reached into my pocket, pulling out a small, folded document. It was the original survey map, the one my grandfather had meticulously made untouched by time. I held it high, letting the sunlight catch the faded ink. The crowd hushed as I spoke, voice steady and clear. "This land? I've owned it for generations. Every inch, every tree, every ripple in this lake. And today, I'm not just reclaiming my property, I'm reclaiming the truth." The silence stretched. Then a ripple in the water caught everyone's attention. I looked down and there she was, Karen's face frozen in shock as she saw what I'd uncovered. The foundation of her office? It wasn't just on my land. It was on the land I owned, right where her plans had been built. And the moment she realized she'd been caught in her own web of lies, the color drained from her face. It wasn't just a revelation. It was a blow so powerful, it shattered her entire illusion of control. Her empire of paper and deceit, it was nothing but a house of cards, and I had just turned the wind against it. The crowd erupted, not in applause, but in stunned silence. I lowered the map, looked her dead in the eye, and said, "This land, this lake, they're mine. And no one can take that away. Not with laws, not with lies, not with threats. Because I own the truth. And as the sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over Briggs Lake, I knew this was the end of her reign. Her false empire lay in ruins, and I had reclaimed what was always mine: the land, the water, the legacy, forever.